Okay, the topic of our webinar today is an update on the EEO1 pay component, or as some people call it, the Component 2 report. My name is Carolyn Potter. I'm an HR consulting manager here at ERA. I did want to note the legal disclaimer language. There's some information about ERA and myself. I am a dual licensed attorney. However, the content of this presentation is not legal advice. It's general information. You should consult with your own attorney before taking any action that might affect your legal right or legal liability associated with this report. Also, for anyone who may be listening to this webinar after today, August 15th, this is a very fluid situation associated with this report. You should review any updates you may receive about the pay component report, because the EEO website is being updated regularly, and something I discussed today could change, or additional information could be posted by the EEOC on the website. So I just want to definitely provide that caution. Okay, so to begin with, where do you find the pay component report information? The EEOC, as I say here, is contracted with NORC, which is an organization associated with the University of Chicago, because the EEOC simply is not and was not able to launch a collection website for this report as quickly as was required. So the website information is there. I'm going to be visiting that website during the PowerPoint presentation today. And so you will see what information is on there. I'm going to be kind of skipping between screens. There's also a help desk associated with it, and the information is on this first PowerPoint. I just also want to let you know that the PowerPoint presentation will be provided to you. It'll probably be this afternoon or possibly tomorrow morning. So you will have all of this information available to you. The other thing I wanted you to make you aware of is that on the top of your screen, you should have a little bubble symbol, and that is the chat or to ask questions during the program. There is a lot of material to cover, and so I am not promising that we're going to be able to get to questions at the end of the program, but you are more than welcome to go ahead and put your questions in, and I will try to respond to those as best I can after the webinar is over. So again, I'm not sure that we would actually have time to answer any of those in the meantime. For anybody that's just getting on the call, if you can please mute your telephone. I do have this set to mute all, but I think callers that are coming on a little bit later, it's not catching their phones. So if you could do that, I would appreciate it. Okay, so why do you have to file the report? If you don't know the history, I'm going to try to make this short because, again, there's a lot of information to get to. The pay component, or the Part 2 report for the EEO1, this was actually finalized under the Obama administration. Employers would have been required to include this pay component with their 2017 EEO1 filing. However, with the change in administration when President Trump took office and his new the head of the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, re-examined the pay report and suspended the pay component requirement before it would have been due with your 2017 EEO1 report. Subsequently, though, a lawsuit was filed in the federal court in District of Columbia by the National Women's Law Center and some other plaintiffs that challenged the suspension of the pay report. Just this spring, on March 4th, 2019, the judge lifted the stay and directed the EEOC to collect the pay data for a 2-year period. It would have allowed the EEOC to either select 2017 and 2018 or 2018 and then moving forward 2019. the EEO decided that they would go ahead and collect the information for 2017 and 2018. And that's how we ended up where we're at. In the course of that and some expert testimony, the EEOC said that they were unable to launch the collection process. I mean, as you may know, they oftentimes aren't ready to launch even the standard EEO-1 report. You know, many years there are extensions on that website even being live. So they definitely were not ready to do this. And so they had to pay and enter into a contract with NORC, which is a survey organization that's associated with the University of Chicago, in order to collect the data. So that's kind of how we got to where we're at. And if some of you are wondering, you know, why something that's so complicated and burdensome is being done on such a last-minute basis, it's because of this lawsuit and the decision of the court there. The EEOC originally, when everything was finalized, had information on their website about the pay component, but when it was subsequently suspended during the Trump administration, they literally pulled everything off of their website. And, you know, anything that they were doing to prepare to collect the data was suspended. And so now it's a big game of catch up here. And all of you who have to file these reports are sort of caught in the middle of it. Okay, so what are we going to try to do in this webinar? We're going to figure out who's required to file the pay component report, explain the basic data requirements, review the formatting requirements for the file uploads, review some common questions relating to everything from the employee snapshot and the wage and hour information associated with it. We're also going to look at the available EEOC guidance on the website and also the FAQs that are available on the website to deal with some more complex questions that you might have specific to your company. Okay, so who's required to file? I want to cover this first because there may be some people on this call that may or may not actually have to provide the pay component report information. All employers who filed an EEO-1 report in 2017 and or 2018 and had 100 or more employees as a whole, with all locations included, must file the pay or component 2 report. If you are a federal contractor or subcontractor and you filed an EEO-1 report in 2017 and or 2018, but you had between 50 and 99 employees, so the only reason that you filed was because of your contractor status, you did not have 100 or more employees, you are not required to file the pay component report. So, you know, if you're on the call and that was the reason for your filing in 2017 and 2018, as long as you had less than 100 employees in those filings in that employee snapshot, then you're not required to file this second component with pay and hour information. Okay, so the component 1 report is going to be that standard EEO-1 report that everybody should have already filed if you had 100 or more employees. Now the deadline to file that was extended this year to May 31st of 2019. And all that report does is it provides counts of employees by race, ethnicity, and gender in each of the 10 EEO-1 categories. The component 2 report, which with the current due date of September 30th of 2019, requires that you aggregate compensation data and hours worked, organized by not only the 10 EEO-1 job categories, but also 12 specified pay bands. So again, effectively, the EEO-1 Component 2 report has about 3,360 data files or data fields. And certainly, assuming that you have to file for 2017 and 2018, it's a lot of information that has to be provided. If you're a multi-establishment employer, the situation's even worse because you're going to have those data fields on consolidated reports, headquarters reports, and then establishment reports for each of those locations that have 50 or more employees. Now, in terms of that employee snapshot and those EEO-1 reports that you filed previously, there is no connection, there is no tie-in between the site where you loaded your EEO-1 standard report information and the report that has been, and the portal that's been created for this pay component report. So you are not required to use the same employee snapshot that was used for your 2017 and 2018 EEO-1 report. You can actually choose any snapshot date from October 1st to December 31st for that prior fourth quarter. So for your 2017 report, you could pick any date between October 1st, 2016 and December 31st, 2016, and then the same for your 2018 report. Any date in that last quarter of 2017 can be used. And it would be the pay data for all full and part-time employees on the payroll on that snapshot date. Now, keep in mind that you will need to match the employees from the snapshot date to their W-2s and also for the total hours worked for the calendar year. Again, it's going to be really what you want to do. You may have those snapshots that you used for your EEO-1 reports where the data was cleaned up. You know, you had everybody identified, race and gender, all of the information that you needed, and you may want to go ahead and use that information in order to generate this pay component report. Or if you wanted to use something that's closer to the end of the year, you could also do that. The other thing to keep in mind is that if for some reason you actually had a point in time during that last quarter of the reporting year where your workforce fell below 100 for full and part-time employees, that you are allowed to select that, in which case you would not be required to file the pay component because you actually wouldn't have been required to file the first report. So I do want to mention that because you are free to choose, again, a date during that period. Okay, so after selecting that snapshot date, whether it's the same one that you used for part one, or if you want to pick a different date, you're going to identify the employees that you had as of that date, full and part-time, and then you'll need to look for some additional information. For those employees, you're going to have to match them to their W-2 information, specifically box 1 on their W-2, which is, it's the wage information that's reported in that box. And then the next step, once you matched that amount, those wages on the W-2, those wages will have to be slotted in the correct pay band, and there are 12 pay bands. And I'm going to show you what the sample form looks like. It's a little bit easier to understand when you see that form. So then once the employee is slated to the appropriate pay band, then the employee has to be placed in the appropriate EEO-1 category, gender and race ethnicity box. For example, a white female accountant earning $85,000 would be in EEO-1 group professional. The pay band for $85,000 is pay band 8. And you would indicate in the corresponding box for a female white, if she was the only employee in that pay band, in that job group, without race, gender, and ethnicity, then there would be a 1 in that box. Now, this is looking at it from a manual basis. So if you were filling the report out manually, that's what you would do. If you plan to upload the data from a spreadsheet, I'm going to show you what that would look like instead. Now I'm going to actually be going out to the EEOC website, and this is what the website looks like. Hold on, let me. Okay, so you should be able to see now what this EEOC website looks like, and I'm going to be looking at some different items on here. You'll see this yellow drop-down box. This is how they're highlighting the newest information and what's happening on the website. And you'll see the latest update is dated today, because today is the day that if you have the information in an Excel spreadsheet, that you can actually upload the data onto the filing system. This is not the website for the filing system. You'll see in the right-hand corner it says login to file. That's actually going to take you to the portal where you would upload that data file that I was talking about. What I want to do, though, is just show you what the sample form is, because I think it helps to kind of visualize what you would be doing here. So in my example where I talked about a white female accountant in the professional job group earning $85,000 a year, I'm going to scroll down here. You'll see on the sample form, it has all these boxes labeled, and then it's got labels across the top. If you were doing this report manually, these are the boxes that you would be filling in for your workforce. And so for that example that I provided of an accountant in the professional job group who's a white female, if you look down on the lower portion of the page, you're going to see on the far left-hand side two first mid-level officials and managers on the second page, and then down below that is professionals. So what I would be doing is I'd be following across, I'd be looking for pay band 8, which is $85,000. That's where her compensation would fall. And then I would follow all the way over to the appropriate column for a white female, which on this form would be column I. And this, of course, is very difficult to follow because the only labeling is on that very first page. But that's effectively what you would be doing if you were completing this form manually for your company. And I will say that the website has been open since mid-July. The only individuals that would be reporting would be if, as an employer, you were reporting it manually. So that's what the sample form looks like. And again, I show it to you just so that you can sort of visualize what I'm talking about in terms of the pieces of information that you need. The other part of the information that you need is going to be the hours worked. And you're going to see on the sample form, there's actually a second part to it as I'm paging down. For each, and you'll see for each cell provide the total number of hours worked in that year. So down here, what we would be doing for that same individual, the female white earning $85,000 a year, is we would go across to that same column I, and then you would insert the hours that she worked for that particular year. So if this was the 2017 pay component report, you'd be reporting the hours that she worked in that year. If she's the only one in that particular box, then it would just be her hours. If there were multiple people that were in the same box, you would be adding all of their hours worked together, and that's the number that would go in that box. As you can see, that's very complicated. So the other option that we're going to talk about is uploading information into the report. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. And I apologize, but I think it's more useful to actually be able to look at the live website and see what these examples look like. Okay, so when it comes to hours worked, For non-exempt employees, you are going to use what the Fair Labor Standards Act defines as hours worked. So the hours worked data that the employers report will be based on the same hours worked that the employers record for FLSA purposes. Of course, for Fair Labor Standards Act purposes, you typically are not including paid leave such as sick leave, PTO, vacation leave, or paid holidays. And so that's another complicating factor is that when you're looking at the hours that a non-exempt employee reports, you have to make sure that it's hours they actually worked as opposed to all the hours they were paid for, meaning where they may have had PTO or it was holiday pay. For exempt employees, you have the option to either report what they're calling proxy hours. So for a full-time exempt employee, you would use proxy hours of 40 per week or 20 hours per week for part-time employees. And again, this is hours worked. So even for exempt employees, when you're calculating the hours that they worked in the year, of course, if it was just 40 hours times, and they worked for you for the entire week, it would be 2,080 hours. But if 80 of those hours were vacation or PTO time, then the number of hours worked would actually be 2,000 as opposed to 2,080. So again, that's another complicating factor in putting this information together. The other thing to keep in mind is that I'm sure that you will have exempt employees that did not work for you for the entire year. And so their W-2 wages are going to be for, say, 6 months of the year because that's how long they worked. It's not what their compensation would have been if they worked for an entire year. It's only what they actually were paid. And in terms of the hours that they worked, it would be based on however many weeks they worked in the year. So for instance, if it was, they started July 1st, then you would be looking at 40 hours, and that's half the year, so it would be times 26 weeks. If they took a week of vacation, then it would actually be 40 times 25 weeks. So again, there's potentially a lot of manual type adjustments that would have to be made to this data in order for it to be correct. In terms of how to file, I know I had showed on the EEOC, the main information website, that you would go to that login. This is also the direct link in order to log into that portal to upload your information. You do have the two options as I described. You can manually enter data into an online form, and that has been available since I believe about mid-July, or you can do what they call the batch reporting, which is going to be uploading Excel CSV files, and that is just available today. If your company filed EEO-1 reports, you should have received login credentials already for the report portal. They were supposed to get those sent out the beginning of July. And it could be by mail, email, a couple of different ways to make sure that employers who had filed EEO-1 reports before would have, and these are different credentials than what you used to file the standard report. So that's why they sent separate credentials. If you did not receive that, then the contact information is here so that you can obtain those credentials that you need to be able to log in to that report portal. And there's an email and a toll-free number that you can call. Okay, so this is what, just briefly, that login portal that I described, pretty basic. Again, if you don't have your sign-in credentials, if you did not receive them, then you can contact by email or by the help desk so that you can get those credentials that you'll need in order to log into that website. Okay, so I'm gonna toggle back over to this other screen so that you can see the entire fact sheet for filing. And let me make this so that you guys can also see it. Okay, so they have an instruction booklet for filers on here, and it's going to give you specific instructions on how to file these reports. And, you know, again, there is no tie-in between the way that you filed your standard EEO1 report and the way that you can file the Component 2 report. So for instance, for multi-establishment employers, you don't have to file it exactly the same way. You may want to, because that may be easier, because that data was clean when you uploaded for your standard EEO1 report, and that's fine. But there is some leeway about how you would report. And I just want you to be familiar with the instructions that are on here. So that's what the instructions look like. And it also provides a lot of the terminology to make sure you understand, you know, what they're talking about, and again, gives definitions for all of that information. Okay, let me get back over. Okay, now the next thing is if you're wondering how do I organize my data to be able to upload it onto this website, they do have a very specific guide for formatting your data and what that will look like. So I'm going to go back to their website so that you can see this full screen. Okay, so the upload file specifications are here, and it's going to give you a sample of what that information would look like. So it's going to be in an Excel spreadsheet format, but specifically a CSV file. And so they're giving you an example here of a type 4 report if you're a multiple establishment report employer. And you'll see there are titles at the top of each column, and the report that you prepare is going to also have to do that. You're going to have these same column names, and I'll show you further down how it explains that. But basically, you're going to have all of this information in one spreadsheet. And if you have a particular group or a category where you just don't have any employees in that group, then it's just not going to appear on your spreadsheet. So again, as opposed to that manually filling that form out where you might have lots of blank boxes where you just don't have any employees that fit into that particular EEO1 group and pay band. In this, you're only going to include where you have employees in a particular group and pay band. So if you look across on this example, you'll see a user ID, which is the number that would have been provided to you. The status code is the type of report. So this one is going to be a type 4 report. That's the type of EEO1 report that was filed. It's going to have a number for the facility if you have multiple establishments and what the name of that is, the address, et cetera. And then if you continue to follow it across, you're going to see some questions where it would be a 1 or 2, a yes or no type answer. And then you're going to see under compensation data for each employee group, it has a job category, and then it has the race, ethnicity, gender. And, you know, as I had discussed with a white female, you were in column I, and similarly, that's what you would have here. So you wouldn't have all those empty boxes. You're just going to show where you actually have an employee, the job category that they're in, the race, ethnicity, and gender box that is associated with that individual or individuals, what pay band they're in, how many employees would be in that box, and then how many hours that employee or those employees worked in the aggregate. So if you look at this first line, you're going to see that there's in job category 1, there is an employee that was in column F, so whatever that combination of gender and race or ethnicity. And then you're going to see that that's pay band 11, so it's going to correspond with that pay band. The total employees that are in that group is 1, and the total hours that are attributed to that employee are 2,000. So you might think, okay, it's an exempt employee. They're in pay job category 1, which is going to be management level. Pay band 11, which is a more highly compensated employee, probably salaried, an exempt employee. So in this instance, probably that proxy of 40 hours per week for the year was used for that employee, and it may have been reduced to reflect vacation that they took, and so you end up with 2,000 hours instead of 2,080. You'll see on the next line, if you look down where the information is different, where it has job category 5, so that's going to be an administrative position. That would be the EEO 1 job category. And then you're going to see the race, ethnicity, gender. That A is going to match to that box. And then you're going to see how many the salary pay band, which is a 9. And then across next to that is the number of employees that are in that box, in that job category, in that pay band. And then you're going to see total hours. So that's going to be 12 employees times whatever those hours are, whether it's a proxy or whether it's their actual hours. That's the aggregate of all 12 employees that are in that particular pay band, job category, and gender and ethnicity. All of those match for those employees. I know this is a lot of information, and again, particularly if this is being done on a manual basis, it's a lot of work. So the next example down here under figure 2 is if you have multiple establishments and you have a facility that has 50 employees, there's a couple of different ways that you can report that information. If you're doing a type 6 report, you're basically just showing the totals. And so they have provided the codes that you would use because you're not going to have a specific job category. So you're going to be showing all the employees in one line. And so they give you sort of what you default to if you're doing a type 6 report for any of your facilities. Now the next portion, it gives you the upload file specifications that you need to understand. So this is how do I set this information up to be able to report it and have it be valid. And so it's giving you all the specific instructions about how you name the columns, what it has to say in order for you to successfully upload the information. You're basically going to have all your establishments as part of the same file, and then you're basically going to indicate the status code, and that's going to distinguish between what type of establishment is being reported, but it's all going to be part of the same spreadsheet. Again, the column names are required, and they have to be identical to what's specified in this description that they provide. Otherwise, you're going to end up with some error codes. And if we page down here, you can see exactly what the setup has to be and what the field column names have to be, no spaces, exactly as you see here. And then again, how long can that field be? What type, so whether it can be alphabetical or numerical, or only one or the other. That's the AN. And then again, it gives you instructions on what those values should be. So again, that user ID is going to be that 8-digit identifier that would have been provided to you with those new login credentials. And then again, column 2, the field or column name is going to be status code, all in caps, no spaces, got to be exactly as it says here. It's only going to be 1 in terms of the length because it's going to be a single-digit number. The type, it has to be a number, so there's an N there. And then you'll see you would indicate what type of report you're going to do and so forth. So this is very specific. And if you don't have the field and column names done correctly or the information either alphabetical or numerical or one or the other, there are going to be codes that are going to be generated. There's going to be error codes generated, and we'll talk about that. So this is how you would want to set up the spreadsheet that you're going to use for each of these pay reports, and you will have to do 2 separate reports. Now, once you have that information in a CSV Excel spreadsheet, that information would be uploaded. There's also an interactive process that occurs. So the information that is on this page, additional reporting to certify uploaded files, this is going to be interactive. This is not going to be a document that you upload. It's basically going to be asking you these questions, and then you're going to have to complete this. But you need to do it as it's specified in this. So it's going to say field name, reporting year. It's either going to be 2017, 2018, and you've got to complete that or you're not going to be able to certify your uploaded files. So again, you just need to make sure that when you're ready to upload those files, that you're also prepared to answer all of these questions and in the format that they described here so that your upload will be successful. And you do have to make sure that you certify those results. Otherwise, it's going to consider that you didn't file the report. So you need to make sure that you follow through on this. Okay, let me go back to my PowerPoint. All right, so again, after you've uploaded the formatted data, then it will be validated. And again, you're going to have to answer those additional questions that I just showed you. So you should be prepared to have to respond to those questions. And then there is a section that will come up where when you submit the information, if there's errors, then you're going to have validation error codes. And there is a description of those codes. And I am going to show you what this looks like because they're very specific codes, and they'll tell you exactly where the problem is if you've made any kind of mistake. Okay, so you're going to see this upload file validation process. Again, that's going to give you more detail about what you need to do. And then there is, let me find that. Okay, yeah, this is where the error codes are. So if you look down on this page, and again, this is on the website, this is going to give you basically a report if there's any issues with the data file that you uploaded. There will be error codes, and this is the key so that you know what those error codes mean. And they're very specific. The error codes are going to tell you exactly what the problem is, whether something is missing, if it's in the wrong format, whatever the problem might be. I will tell you that I know they just had updated this information to provide more error codes and what they mean. And I would imagine that as employers start to upload their data, they may add to these error codes because I suspect that there are mistakes that might be made that they haven't contemplated, and so they may not have them on this list yet. I know this has already been updated, and so at the point, if you're uploading this data yourself, you may want to check this again before you do it, because I would imagine that this is going to continue to be updated as problems occur, as more companies actually upload their information, because obviously they have to find the source of the problem and why the report can't be validated. So I would definitely, again, check this at the point that you're ready to upload your data so that you have the information about what mistakes might have occurred. Okay. Go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so that tells you what the file validation issues might be. Now, there's all sorts of questions that come up associated with this report. And so what the EEOC and NORC have done is to try to come up with a lot of FAQs to address the questions that employers may have. And the FAQs are a collection, but they're continuing to add to the FAQs that they have posted online. And I think it's based primarily on the questions that they're receiving on through their email help and also their help desk, the telephone questions that are available. So I do want to show you what those FAQs look like. And I will tell you just today when I checked them, there was an additional FAQ that hadn't been there before. So they are adding to this based on questions that they're getting, I think, on a daily basis. So these are the FAQs that are on the website, and you'll see they address all sorts of different issues. And again, I'm sure that this is based on maybe questions that they contemplate employers are having, but also they are adding to the FAQs that are online. So I would definitely recommend, again, that you review this information, and I'm sure that it's going to continue to build as this process goes forward and they receive more questions that they think that probably multiple employers may have the same issues. At this point, as it states here, the deadline is September 30th, 2019, and then it's got several questions having to do with the filing requirements. This is the new question that I just saw that came up, and again, I'm sure it was based on helpline questions that they were getting about how do you report if you allow employees to report non-binary gender, and so they address that question and how to report that appropriately on the pay component report. And if we're going to page down here, again, one of the questions that's come up is, well, how do we report wages? And they are very specific that you need to use the box 1 wages on the W-2 for each employee. And there are questions relating to that. So again, remember that you're always referring back to that snapshot. You're not just going to pick up all the employees that were issued a W-2 for the calendar year. You're only looking at those individuals that were on your employee snapshot period. So don't report more information than you need to. Again, lots of questions about the earnings issue, gross income. No. W-2 box 1 earnings is what you need to include. The other question that certainly has come up is, what if you have an employee that only worked for part of the year? You don't need to make any adjustments and figure out what their earnings would have been for the full calendar year, because again, you're only going to be reporting the hours that they actually worked, or those proxy hours that they actually worked during the year. So it will be tied into their W-2 wages. You don't need to do anything with that. There's a question about what if there was a W-2 wage data correction? What if you have an employee that started out working in the U.S. and then they transferred overseas, and then they transferred back? So they answer questions about that. On the hours worked section of it, again, and I know that this makes it much more complicated, but what they are insisting is that hours worked has to be hours worked. It shouldn't include other paid time that an employee may have had for PTO, holiday, sick pay, etc. It also addresses a lot of questions about multi-establishment reporting. And so if you file a multi-establishment report, I would recommend that you look at these questions. And again, you don't have to file exactly the same way that you did on the standard report, but it may make more sense to do that. Another area where there can be a lot of questions is where there have been acquisitions and mergers. This question, I think, is helpful. If you had an acquisition that was completed before the acquiring company selected Workforce Snapshot, then if you had acquired them before that snapshot, then you're required and you have to submit that component, the component 2 data for that year. But there are other situations where if you had an acquisition and that information isn't available to you, that's something that you would make a notation for, that information is not available, and that's sufficient for them. But there's certainly some different scenarios here that may or may not apply to you. And if you have a situation where it's very unique, you don't see an FAQ that deals with your specific scenario, I would definitely encourage you to contact the help desk that they have set up for technical guidance about the appropriate way to handle it. As I said, I think these are beginning to build as they get more questions, and they may go ahead and post it. But if you don't see something that addresses your situation, I wouldn't guess. I would go ahead and call the help desk and make sure that you've got guidance that you can rely on. Unfortunately, there's not other resources to help in that situation because nobody's had to file this report before. So it's not like there's, well, last year people did this. This is the first time it's happened. So again, if you have a situation and you don't see any guidance in these FAQs or in the other instructions that are provided, then definitely contact the help desk. Another area is if you had spin-offs. So, if your company got rid of a line of business or a division, there's some questions and answers there. Also for professional employer organizations, some general questions about the online filing system. Keep in mind, again, that this system is not tied in any way to that standard report that you would have already completed. So nothing is going to be pre-populated the way that it might be when you file your EEO-1, the standard report, and when you sign in, you may have some information already in there because you filed before. You're not going to have this on this system. It's not carrying any information over. One of the areas that's certainly a concern because of the type of information that's in this report, the paid data, even though it's broken into paid bands, certainly there's a concern that this information could be available under Freedom of Information Act requests. And again, they address some of those concerns. And also the data system security, could somebody hack into this information? There's some information there from NORC, again, the organization that's collecting this information. I'm going to flip back here to the PowerPoint, and let me get this back so that you all can see it. Okay. So what happens if you don't file it? Whether you just are just overwhelmed and the information isn't available and you don't have the manpower to do it. If you don't file it, the EEOC can seek a court order requiring non-compliant employers to file an EEO-1 report. And of course, there's the costs potentially associated with that. But there are no specific civil penalties or fees or fines for failing to file the report for most employers. If you are a federal contractor, though, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs can cancel, terminate, or suspend all or a portion of any federal contract held by a non-compliant employer. You can also, the ultimate punishment would be to be debarred for either permanently or for a specified period of time. And where this might arise is if you are a federal contractor or subcontractor, you are required to file the EEO-1 report, and you have 100 or more employees, so you are also required to file the pay component report. If your establishment was selected for a compliance review, the OFCCP will typically ask for copies of these reports. And so if you can't produce those, then you may have a non-compliant situation in the audit associated with your federal contracts. Also, filing false information. So say you file it, but it doesn't have correct information in it. That is more significant in terms of the liability associated with it, fines, imprisonment for filing false documents. So you certainly want to make sure that your information is going to be accurate. Now, in terms of how the data is going to be used, at the time, the thought was that the data was going to be subjected to all of these statistical testing relating to pay equity issues. And the idea was that the data could be used as a trigger to investigate employers. So basically, it was going to be this giant compensation database that could be statistically analyzed, and then you could narrow it down looking at geography, types of industries, do comparisons, all of those types of things that potentially could trigger an investigation if, say, a particular employer had a lot of real outliers in terms of pay equity issues. The Trump administration obviously had suspended this entire report. And so they are taking the position that there's limited utility to the pay data and that it really isn't justified based on the type of burden that it's placing on employers. Nevertheless, the EEOC commissioner has said that they will validate the data, review it, and then evaluate how useful the data might be on a going forward basis. Certainly, not what was envisioned under the Obama administration in terms of how the data would be used. Okay, so as I said, the manual reporting has been available since the report portal opened in mid-July. The reporting using a file upload is available today, starting today. I would recommend that if you use a payroll provider or processor, such as an ADP, a Paycor, Paylocity, you may want to check with them and see whether or not they have developed or are developing reports to deal with this, with the pay component portion of this. I know I spoke to one of our members who is an ADP customer. They indicated that ADP has developed a report for this information. I did speak to another member who said that their understanding was that Paycor was developing a report for this, and that it would be ready, before the filing deadline. So, of course, the complication there is that if you have changed payroll providers or processors recently, there may be an issue with, say, the 2017 report, because that information may not be on their system. And so, again, that's where the complication arises, is having that data all the way back to, again, that fourth quarter of 2016 in order to do this, the report for 2017. Okay, so if you haven't started yet, as you can see, I would check with, again, payroll provider or processor, see if they're going to have a report prepared where they may be able to help you generate this information, which would be a huge help to you in doing this. If you don't, then you're going to have to start to get this information ready. You're going to have to pull those snapshots from your 2017, 2018 EEO1 standard reports. And again, you're going to have to start matching that data, the W-2 wages, get that information slated into those pay bands, look back at hours worked, make adjustments for it to make sure that it is hours worked and that it's not including PTO, vacation, sick days, et cetera. And then you're going to have to format the information appropriately. And again, I think I've shown you all of the resources and the guidance in terms of how to do that. At this point, there's no indication that the filing requirement is going to be stayed. An appeal was filed to the court's decision, but they did not request stay when that appeal was filed. So while the appeal is going forward, in the meantime, this process is going forward also. Again, the deadline for filing is September 30th, 2019. At this point, we have no way of knowing whether that filing deadline could be extended. One of the things that the EEOC is going to be looking at and reporting back to the court is comparing their percentage of filings that are completed for the standard EEO1 report and compare that to the percentage of employers that are filing the Component 2 pay report to see whether or not they have a similar percentage that have actually completed the report. Now, whether or not, say that percentage is much lower near September 30th, whether they will extend that portal being open, I don't know. Certainly be on the lookout for updates from us and alerts from us. We would certainly let you know immediately if there was an extension or if there was some other activity associated with this report, but I would not rely on that. The other thing I wanted to make you aware of is that while typically the EEOC pretty much automatically will grant extensions for employers to file the standard EEO1 report, they are not doing that with respect to this Component 2 pay report. So please keep that in mind. Do not assume that you will be able to get an extension or that the portal will remain open. As I mentioned, we will continue to provide updates regarding this pay Component 2 report. And we would recommend that you also regularly check the website the website information is there. And I would navigate around that website. I would look at the FAQs to see if there's anything in addition there. And also, as I showed you, when you sign on to that website, on that very first page, there is a drop-down menu that appears with the with the updates in yellow. So certainly when you're getting your information ready and you're going to be uploading, I would look at all of that again. You may want to review the FAQs again, and I would definitely review those codes that they're using if there's an issue with the validity of your data, so that if you get any of those codes back when you try to upload your information, you're going to know what the problem is so that you can make those corrections in your data file before you upload it again. I've also got the portal website address on there, which is also linked on that homepage that I described, and that's where you actually are uploading your files. Of course, you can contact myself, and my email address is there, Carol Rubel here in Cincinnati, or Lori Llewellyn, and her email address is provided also in our Columbus office. I don't know that I have any questions here. If any of you have any specific questions, I will leave this live. So if you want to go and click on that bubble and you want to send me any questions, you're welcome to. Or if you just want to go ahead and email me at my email address, I will do my best to help you. But I would definitely recommend getting on the website and navigating the website. Again, it does have some very good information, and it's being updated on a regular basis. And certainly be on the lookout. We will send out alerts if something significant happens with respect to the filing deadline, or any other changes that might happen. I thank you very much for participating. And again, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email myself or Carol Rubel or Lori Llewellyn. Thank you.